Cats. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Insomnihack Shack. Today we're going to be sorting out the in-bedroom entertainment. Not like this. So I thought it might be a good idea to plan this one out, just because there's a lot of calculations to do and I don't want to waste any materials or anything. I like using Illustrator just to make sure that I get all my dimensions right. Now I'm starting out with this old 2009 iMac. It's no good for doing any work on anymore, but it's still pretty good for streaming media and stuff. Now, most of the calculations going forward are going to be based around the size of the bed, so I just want to make sure I get these dimensions right. Basically dictate where the computer will sit. And I just want to make sure that I've got plenty of room for my fat legs to sit underneath. Now I want the console to obviously retract and get out of the way, and hopefully sit at the foot of the bed like this. Now one simple way to do that would be to have an arm and have it rotate around a pivot point. The problem with that is, So instead of having one arm at each end, let's have two arms at each end, and that can keep the table level. Because as we all know, four arms are better than two. Now some legs will help support the weight of the unit, and then we need something in the middle that everything can pivot around. Now the Mac itself weighs just over 9 kilos, and the amount of wood needed to make this system will be just shy of 6 kilos. Now we haven't just got to contend with the weight of what we're moving, it's also the distance from the axis. Now this will require roughly 115 Newton meters in order to rotate the console. Now a good way to help with this rotation is to add a counterbalance on the other side. Now the challenge that we have here is that the counterbalance side is shorter than the arm side, so we need to have a larger weight, roughly 8 kilos on each side. Now another reason I wanted to plan it out like this first is because I wanted to see when any of the parts would intersect. So looking from the aerial view, you can see when things rotate, we need to make sure that the other parts are not in the way. With all the part cuts, I could start assembling some of the pieces in the shack and then move it up to the bedroom when it's ready. This is more of a proof of concept really than anything. It's just something that I've always been interested in ever since watching Wallace and Gromit as a kid. I really like the idea of sort of automated homes and gadgets and kind of pointless things around the house. In a world where everything is kind of automatic and digital these days, I really like the idea of things which are just stupidly over-engineered and kind of Rube Goldberg or Heath Robinson kind of machines. Now for this to be really structurally sound and operate perfectly, you'd use something really rigid like metal, aluminium frame and proper bearings, but I just wanted to make this with what I had lying around, so crappy construction pine and old bits of plywood, and it'll do the job. I also really like the juxtaposition of like modern streaming technology, well, as modern as a 11-year-old computer can be, and this kind of lo-fi, old-fashioned wooden mechanics, almost like an automaton, like a mechanical toy. It started out really flimsy and I was starting to worry that it wasn't going to work, but as more of the parts came together, it actually became quite rigid. And you can see here that the whole unit moves just by pushing one of the arms. Now the countertop was a bit of a tricky one because I wanted it to be light enough so it didn't add extra weight to the mechanism, but also strong enough to support quite a heavy computer. So I went for this sort of dowel skeleton, and then I'm going to skin it with some laminations of plywood. Now, as classic as a piece of design the iMac is, I wanted to make it even more seamless with the unit, so I wanted to hide the base in the top itself. It's just a case of taking 3 thin sheets of plywood and cutting the profile out of the middle sheet. The only other challenge is that the base itself is actually tapered, so I just need to take a little bit of material off the top sheet. I did think about permanently attaching the Mac itself inside it for a bit more structural integrity, but I thought it was a bad idea, so instead it just slots in a nice snug fit. Next up is the legs, and I can actually make those all in one whole piece. There's no moving parts in the legs, and they can be taken up to the bedroom once they're finished. Now, in order for the arms to rotate properly, I'm just going to round the tops off, and that way they can fit snugly inside the legs. Alexa, play the second greatest podcast ever.
Now playing Fools with Tools podcast on SoundCloud.
You could probably do it on your glasses, like catch it into your...
Oh, that would be a lot easier.
That's probably a better idea.
Or you could not mutilate yourself.
I honestly thought like a cool, because every YouTuber is looking for the perfect product to sell, right?
Yeah.
So here's mine. I want a tape measure that doesn't have any marks on it. It's just white.
Now, there isn't a lot of lateral force on this. This is all in the rotation around the axis. But I was still wanting the base to be quite chunky and heavy. And there's also going to be metal struts that go through actually the middle of the bed. And instead of actually having to damage the bed, they just sit underneath the mattress. So I just need to fabricate some steel plates that can hold the bars that go across the bed. Uncharacteristically in the Hack Shack, this project required quite a lot of accuracy. So I was constantly measuring things, checking angles just to make sure that everything was lined up, because once it's in place, this thing has to kind of run true to make sure that everything is neat and all kind of perpendicular. Now, the sanding is not really for aesthetic purposes, it's more just to give smooth surfaces so that it will hopefully reduce friction with any of the moving parts, especially things like inside here where the axles will be turning. And these pieces are the bottom of the counterweights, so these will actually rotate and hold the weight on that platform. Now it's a case of putting it all together and hoping that everything goes to plan, as they say. Again, just double checking that any of the kind of mating surfaces of wood against wood are hopefully as smooth as possible. I also took the step of adding plastic washer spaces in between any of the two surfaces. I'll just cut them out of the lid of some old plastic tubs. Now you might recognise this dirty old motor from the roasting spit that we made last year. Funnily enough, I've not been roasting that many wild hogs lately, so I wanted to put this motor to better use. Now this motor is rated for 18 kilograms, but obviously that's not enough because we've now got the counterweight as well, so we need 2 motors. Now what's great about these rotisserie motors is that they actually are self-reversing. So as soon as the unit gets to one extent, so the floor on one side, it will stop, pause for a moment, and then reverse and come back the other way. And it also means that I can mount them on opposite sides of the unit and not worry about the rotation. Now the speed is roughly 2 or 3 revolutions per minute. And considering we're not really travelling even half the arc, that gives us about 10-15 seconds between one end of the bed to the other. I found that under load the unit was creaking quite a lot because of the wood, so I've just decided to add a little bit of candle wax, which will act as a nice bit of lube. Now, in order to get the weight in a kind of slimline package like this, these are actually just really cheap. I think they're cast iron, and it's weight that hold down like a parasol outside. And instead of trying to mount them directly to the unit itself, I'm going to put them onto these little wooden bases, and they can be screwed on quickly and easily instead of trying to actually attach them in situ. Haha, they look like little faces. Now obviously the Mac itself needs power supply running to it. And this is a bit of a challenge getting the cable to run through the system itself, especially with moving parts, because you've got to allow for the cable to kind of retract, and you don't want it to be under tension. So the solution was actually to run it down the arm itself and then through the pivot point. Not the one that's under tension from the motor though, so the one next to it. And then lastly, feeding the power cable through underneath for the Mac. So if I can run the 2 motors off this smart plug, it would be easy to control with Alexa, but I've also got these little Alexa buttons. I just want to check that this works by just turning this light on and off. Sweet, so that's good to go. And the Mac doesn't need to be automated, so that it can just go into a regular plug socket.
Girl. Not long now. No, jeez.